Hello and welcome to another edition, an exciting edition of Cracking the Rich Code, the podcast. I'm your host, John Verico, and I have a fantastic guest for you today. I do every time we do this podcast, let's be honest. Everybody in the Cracking the Rich Code community and in this book series are absolutely fantastic in their own way. This guy, you're going to love him. I have to tell you, Bill is somebody that I strive to be like, and maybe am already too much like, and I'll talk about that as we get into it. But I will just tell you this: he's one of those people who, like me, have found that after retiring from a corporate career or whatever, you find yourself busier than ever, delving into a whole bunch of different stuff. And wait till Bill tells you about it. So let's bring on our guest today, Bill McGough. Bill, how are you doing today? Here we go. There he
I'm doing
is.
great, John. How are you?
Oh, doing terrific. Doing terrific. I don't know if you can hear the intro as I was bringing you on, but I was saying the fact that, after we retire from a corporate job, or in my case, a government job for so many decades of working, then all of a sudden we find ourselves in retirement busier than we were before, kind of
Absolutely.
diving into so many new projects, things that we've always wanted to do, maybe discovering whole new paths. And you have had quite an interesting path, Bill.
I definitely have. And good to see you, John. And thanks for the invite and just for being part of the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's a lot of fun. I get a chance to talk to people like you and learn so much each and every time we do these things.
Awesome.
So, Bill, we know that you're an author in Cracking the Rich Code, and you've done so many different things. Bill, you are a consultant, a speaker, a transformational coach. You now run a successful bed and breakfast in Brownsburg, Virginia. You're a songwriter. Let's just talk about what's going on for Bill these days.
That's a good question. So, what's interesting is when I retired from my corporate life, it was very fruitful, very productive, worked and lived internationally. I didn't have a plan. I actually just got into retirement and said, I'm not the kind of guy that's going to sit by the ocean and watch the waves every day. And so I just started doing things. We took on a renovation or restoration of an old 1815 building, did the work ourselves, design and build, set up the B&B. That kind of flowed into a volunteerism project in the local community. It's a little historic village called Brownsburg, Virginia, in the Shenandoah Valley, and there was an old church that had a major issue with the ceiling structure, or floor structure rather, and that required a lot of I'm going to say volunteerism. So I got involved in that, and that flowered into all kinds of things: fundraising, outreach to universities, all kinds of things. Then I got involved in a film. An international filmmaker named Nick Perez was on staff at Washington Lee University. Next thing you know, we're making a film, and I'm one of the producers of it. And that's going to be an hour and 15 minutes long, and it's going to be actually released in May of this year. And then I started writing songs, and
Wait,
flowered all kinds
stop.
of stuff.
What what is the film about?
So the film is about the history of this area, and it talks about the broad history, Civil War, the fact that the B&B is on the old wagon road, and then it gets into post-slavery history to post-slavery history. It gets into what life is like every day. This unique little village is a time capsule of not just architecture, but about how life used to be, where you shake hands with somebody, you get information, to do a deal. You don't need a written contract. It's the kind of place where you get information still from the post office, gossip and latest information. And it's just a really cool place, and little things. And I'll give a simple tradition. People, a lot of gardeners in the area, they'll drop extra bounty in the post office. So you might pick up a piece of mail, have a chat with the postman, and then grab a couple of tomatoes and a cucumber, and then leave something if you have something. So it's just a unique little place in the
I
world.
love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Love it. So it's a documentary on the area. That's really
Yeah. Yeah.
fantastic.
It's awesome.
I love doing stuff like
Yeah.
that. I've been fortunate enough in my career to have worked with some documentary producers and helped in productions of a variety of documentaries, and I always love that kind of work. People don't really appreciate what we call long format
Oh,
media
right.
as much
Yeah. Yeah.
anymore, but I think there's a real hunger for the produced pieces,
Oh, yeah.
and I think they're really exciting. So so now somehow this got you into songwriting.
Yes. So I'm going to back you up because it's an interesting little story. So I'm just going to give a little bit of history about myself, and then I think it'll explain a bit about how my mind works and why I'm involved in so many things. So I was born in Hell's Kitchen, New York City. In
Oh,
actually grew up in an immigrant building that was a vestige back to the 1800s. Right, my ancestors came from Germany and Ireland, and we lived there until the early 1970s. I was a small boy. Then I grew up upstate New York, about an hour and 15 minutes north, a small community, great community called Putnam Lake. But what's unique about me is my education path was very unorthodox. I barely passed high school with a 66, and that's because my dad locked me in my sister's house for 2 weeks to pass the state test. And I went to university for a total of 45 minutes, psychology 101, ironically. Now, I'm not anti-education whatsoever, so I don't want to, leave that. I'm definitely pro-education. It was just my path. Well, that actually led me down a path of having to learn, how do I compensate for that? And my answer became using my mind. So I learned how to get control of my mindset. I learned how my mind works, how to change the tape running in there, kind of reprogram it, if you will, to get better results. And that led me from bag boy at a supermarket to running several $100 million projects internationally, senior vice president roles at Deloitte Consulting and Bayer. And it was just an amazing life that was unexpected from that. And because I learned all that, and I know about things like neuroplasticity, I know about things like affirmations, and I'd learned all the techniques, many in the early 80s weren't even written heavily about. So I
right,
learned those and tried and practiced. But that's really what was the thing that was able to harness my energy. So I was able to get to a point where it was just about work and effort and breaking through things to
right.
get what I wanted out of my life, right? And so it became an amazing set of awakenings, if you will, and understandings that got me to do all these things. So songwriting is interesting. So roll the tape forward, and this is recent actually, and it's cool. I'm a kind of self-described expert on the mind because of all the testing and learning I've done. Plenty of failures, by the way, but a lot of learnings. And by writing the book "Cracking the Rich Code," right, the chapter, but also writing a book I'm writing called "The Energy Principle," I spent hundreds of hours writing. And literally on January 31st, recently, I woke up in the middle of the night with a full song in my head. So much so that I had to wake up at 4:30 a.m. and write it down. Well,
Wow.
since then, and this is a little over 2.5 weeks, I've written 16 songs, and so good quality wise that I've actually copyrighted 10 of them already. And I'm actually in contact with the music industry. And that came out of, if you think about it, all that writing is creating, kind of a hook to write a chapter, and then transitions, and then an out. It's the same structure or same part of your brain that's actually used in writing songs. So my brain just kind of woke up, and trust me, I was not a songwriter. So it's kind of recent proof that working with your mind, using it as a muscle, if you will, opens up things
Right.
and allows other things to happen. So I'm a huge fan of it and a lifelong learner of how the mind works. It's absolutely intriguing and amazing what the potential is in each of us.
Bill, when you talked about the fact that you're writing the chapter in for cracking the rich code, I've heard this from other authors as well, and I experienced it myself. And there's another whole book series that I've been involved with where the contributions are only a page, and
Oh,
but just that little bit of writing sometimes is just the spark we need that get those
yes,
creative juices going, that get our mind thinking in a different way. So many times people will say, "Oh, I'm not an author; it's not for me," and then they realize when they do actually write something that it just sparks this creativity within themselves,
absolutely.
and then all of a sudden they're boom, stuff starts to flow, and all it
Yeah.
takes is that little catalyst.
It's amazing, and I gotta say too is I've only been part of the Cracking the Rich Code group for several months now, but the talent and caliber of professionals on that group are amazing. You have a big international career, you travel, you do big things, you get kind of confident in what you know, and this group is a great group in terms of what I can learn from and what I can contribute to, and I'm blown away by the caliber. It's from the very first call, very first couple of minutes, I was just smiling inside and outside, like, wow, this group I can learn from. And these are the people that are pushing the next things in the world in all regards. And it's just incredible to be part of that.
It's so true, and actually, that's why I love doing this podcast because I get the opportunity to kind of deep dive with some of the authors, not just read the stuff that they've written, which is all brilliant, not just meeting them in the masterminds that we have every month, which you're right. I mean, just chatting with people and learning from them in those brief encounters are amazing. But then I'm fortunate enough as I get to do this and I get to deep dive and dig into their brains even more, and so it's a learning experience for me. And you're
That's
right,
awesome.
there are some amazing,
Oh, it's
amazing people in
unbelievable.
this community. Yeah,
And
yeah,
Jim Britt's the perfect leader of that group too, just given his past is he's the perfect guy and probably the very unique person that can pull that kind of group off.
yeah, yeah. It's absolutely amazing. So now, Bill, excuse me. Uh, you you said that kind of this writing kind of sparked this whole thing in you, and now you're writing songs, and you have a book coming out too as
I do.
well,
Yep.
correct?
Yep.
So look at all this. Look at all how those started. Let's backtrack just a moment, and
Sure.
I've asked this question from some other folks as well. But when you first got the call about being a contributing author and cracking the rich code, had you written anything prior to that yet?
So I hadn't. I've been working on my book, but not completed to a proof copy yet. So I would say I was about halfway through writing my own book. And what's interesting is in pitching the book and the idea of it, um, Jim Britt's name came up, and I honestly didn't know him at first. And when I heard his story and his connection to Tony Robbins and Jim Rohn and what he had did and how he was kind of a founder, if you will, of this whole movement, I was blown away because this is the movement I've been delving in my whole life since the mid '80s. And I knew these names and I knew what they had done. And I realized Jim was kind of the very cradle, the foundation of it. I was like, wow, this is amazing. And then when I did a call with Jim, it was supposed to be 45 minutes. It went on for double the time and more because it was such a natural discussion between us. And I was like, okay, I'm home. This is it.
That is exactly what happens, right? It's supposed to be one of those, 15 or 30-minute
Okay.
discovery call kind of things,
Yeah.
and next thing you've invested hours into it or whatever happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know when, I've been an author a contributing author in multiple books. A lot of them prior to getting involved in this stuff they were kind of textbooks on communication. And it was interesting and fun to write, but it wasn't really where I wanted to go. I mean, I was sharing my knowledge in communication. That was my background.
Yeah.
And so I like being that kind of mentor coach kind of a thing. And I
Oh,
loved
it's great.
the
Yeah.
being able to share what I had learned. But then Jim calls and he's like, I got this book, Cracking the Rich Code. And I'm like, wait a minute, I worked my whole career in government, man.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I don't know anything about making money. That's certainly not me.
Right.
And then we started talking, and he talked about richness of life. Well,
Yeah.
that's a spark. Yeah, let's do
Exactly.
that. Let's talk about that.
Oh, totally.
And you're right. It gets your juices going. And then when we did the first mastermind call, and I got to meet some of the other folks, I was like
Oh,
so
yeah.
triggered. I said,
It's
this is
it's great.
fantastic. It's great. It's great. So tell us a little bit about your upcoming book. But actually, before we do that, let's talk about what brought you here, which is the chapter in Cracking the Rich Code in the upcoming volume 20.
Right.
So
So I
your
Yep.
chapter is you are far more powerful than you've been taught.
Right. So it's an interesting
Intriguing.
thing. So what happened is when I retired, as I mentioned, I didn't have a formal plan. I got involved in all these things around history and it's been amazing. And the people I've met, the network of people being involved in a film and the community work, thousands of hours actually, right? So it's been amazing. And then one day I just sat down and I said, okay, I want to focus my future on the future, not the past, right? Past is great, history is great, but I realized there's a lot of I'm gonna call them kids loosely, but mid 20s to mid 40s that are just lost, right? And people, and I think social media has had a huge impact on them. And in some cases, it might be bad parenting, or it might be just a poor attitude. But I see that there's way too many people walking around in life that are not realizing they have much more potential, and they don't know how to use that thing called their brain or their mind to their benefit, right? It's interesting. I use a funny phrase. Most people don't even know to work on their brain. They spend more time bringing out the trash weekly than they do working on their own mindset, right? And so what I'm
Wow.
here to say is I can help people with a positive trade-off. The stat, by the way, is in the mid 20s, mid 30s, people use social media 6 hours a day, and I'm proposing a trade-off saying, okay, give me an hour. That's all I need. And get rid of 2 or 3 other hours and take up a new positive hobby. So if I get you away from that, you can still check the news, you can still do stuff, but 6 hours is way too much and it's actually doing damage to your brain and your mindset. I'm going to shift you where you can focus on a future and gain organic time for whatever hobby you want, but improve your life significantly. And that's the whole genesis of it. And so what happened is I said, okay, I have something to offer, which is my own experience. It was unorthodox, but because of that, I learned a lot of things about how my mind works, right? I know the difference between the conscious mind, subconscious mind. I know all the techniques and how to shift energy and all these things. So what I did is I said, okay, I don't know that kids in that age range or people in that age range know what to do. And there's a lot of stuff out there, but it's hard to manage through the myriad of techniques and tactics and promotions. So I said, let me make it approachable. Let me write a book which is going to help them to figure that out. And then in the process of writing the book, Cracking the Rich Code came up. And I said, okay, that's a great deviation. And I'm one of those people, I don't just stay on one path. If things open up to me, which Cracking the Rich Code did, I'm very happy to go down the path. And that will add to my journey with my book. And I'm sure the quality of the output and the support I'll get from Jim's group will just help me further that, right? And so that's really the connection. And then a little bit about my book. So I'm making it approachable. I start off with, okay, here's how your mind actually works, right? Very plain language. Anybody can pick it up and understand it. Then I talk about your nervous system. How do you regulate your nervous system? Because if it's not regulated, it's hard to change, right? You're going to try to put things in your brain, but if your nervous system's not regulated, it just won't take. And there's very nuanced things around tactics. For example, when you do an affirmation, which is I kind of call it a personal prayer. You got to do it in the present tense. You got to do it with emotion. You got to do it in a certain way. So I explain those things. I explain what works and also some things that didn't work so well for me, so they know the difference. And then I keep walking them through that. And then I have a framework of 5 levels of transformation. I have them identify where they are today. And then I give them aspirations of what level do you want to target. And then I give them a myriad of tactics, and I'll call it tactic stacking. Example, a morning routine which puts you in the right mood early in the morning. I use one called grounding. I put my feet on the ground when I get out of bed, right? But I look at my 2 beautiful grandchildren's faces in my mind, and there's no way I can start a day off in a negative mood, right? So that's a simple technique I use. Many others, successful people in particular, use similar techniques. Then I say, okay, now how do you get control of what's inside your mind that might not be serving you well? What's the bad tape running in your mind, so to speak, right? And the analogy I would
Right.
use is we all have technology, right? We have iPhones, we have iPads, we have, whatever, laptops. If we don't update the software, the machine doesn't
Boy, do
run
we
good.
have technology.
So, yeah. So basically what I'm teaching people in my way of thinking is I'm teaching you to upgrade the software because most of your software, which is your mindset, hasn't been upgraded, right? Since a very long time. So you're kind of stuck in this old tape, which could be due to a number of factors. And I'm saying I can help you change that tape running, and that's your starting point. And then when you get there, you start figuring out things, and you can, break through all kinds of barriers and have all kinds of amazing things happen when you start doing this kind of work. So that's the whole idea. And the reason my book is unique, so there's thousands of self-help books, right? And concepts and trainings. Mine is approachable, easy to read, easy to understand. But if you think about the bigger programs out in the marketplace, I won't mention the names, they could easily be $3,000 to $5,000. So mine is going to be approachable cost-wise, approachable content-wise. And when I target that group, I'll be looking at universities, colleges, any kind of groups that have those people, and just trying to inspire people through my own story to say, hey, I was that kid that was a rebel without a clue. I had no future prospects. But once I harnessed what I had already within me and learned about it, that's when all the breakthroughs started happening, right? And I'm here to tell people, and I know this sounds a little bold, but the potential in you is nearly unlimited. It's just about learning how to tap into it. It's kind of like we were given this body and brain, but without the instruction manual. So I'm
Pretty much
looking,
it. Yes.
yeah, and that's really what I'm looking to do.
And you call what you do the energy principle,
I do.
which is kind of a shortened version of inner energy, correct?
Exactly right. Yep.
Okay.
It's harnessing that inner energy inside of you. And by the way, I'll make a claim about that. If you have anxiety, it doesn't have to be a negative. It could be a positive. It's about harnessing that energy, right? So a lot of people get diagnosed in modern times with a problem. And if you think about all the business leaders and all the leaders we know about in the world currently or in the past, they would probably all be diagnosed with some mental disorder, right? Like you have ADHD, or you have this. And what I'm here to say is it's just energy, and it's how you harness it and how you harness it and use it for good in the world. And that's really what it comes down to at the end of the day.
Well, that's like the whole concept of reframing, like public speaking, right? And that is the number one fear in the world. And there's so much rationale behind that. but and whole stories I can get into, but this is your show. But anyway, but to overcome that, when people say, "Oh, I'm nervous," no, you reframe it and you realize that feeling nervous and feeling excited are exactly the same physiological symptoms. It's just a
Exactly.
matter of reframing how you look at it. So
Yep.
instead of being nervous, you're excited. And all of a sudden, your attitude towards facing that new thing is a whole different perspective.
Absolutely, yeah, and I'll give an example on that. So, one of the things I had to do to compensate for my lack of education is push through a lot of failures, right? Because to learn, I had to go into things like when I first started, running big programs, I didn't know what a risk plan was. I didn't know what a critical path. I didn't know any of it, right?
Right.
So what I
Right.
literally did was I borrowed Thomas Edison's mindset, which I became a big fan. I read everything I could consume about how he thought. I visited his labs to get that personal touch of, the artifacts he had around him, his desk, his everything. And what I learned was a great story in his history was when his labs burnt down at one point, and he was in his young 60s, I think 65.
Mhm.
He'd lost everything, all his content, all his IP, right? He literally said to his son, "Go get your mother. This is the most amazing fire she'll probably ever see." And immediately shifted to, "We're going to make it bigger and better than ever." So I borrowed that mindset when I was going through failures. I said, "Okay, these are not failures. These are steps towards success." So I could
Yes.
put myself in budget meetings where I would get my butt kicked. I can put myself in difficult situations, but reframed it as learning experiences. And therefore, it allowed myself to do it, and then I started to learn exponentially. Now, if I looked at those as failures, they would have been crushing. They probably would have stopped me in my tracks and I would have shied away from that kind of work. But that little reframing, to your point, is a very, very powerful technique in and of itself.
Yeah, that's what I love about people like you and this whole concept is the fact that we realize that there are no mistakes. Well, there are mistakes, but every mistake is a learning opportunity. And one of my favorite quotes of
Exactly.
all time is from goodness, I forgot her first name, but the last name is Dyson. But it is always make new mistakes.
Exactly.
And each time, when you look at the things that have happened in life, the decisions we've made, the whether or not they were successful, every one of those opportunities was an opportunity to learn.
Exactly.
I was fortunate enough to have a boss in one organization who took 10% of the budget and put it towards projects that were likely to fail.
Yep. Which is great.
And
Love that.
and and, and he did that. And he said, if you are successful, we will be, they'll be game changers. But
Yep.
if you're not, we have learned from it. All I ask is that you devote your energies to trying to see if this could work or
Yep.
finding a way to see if it was possible.
Yep.
And it was amazing how many of those projects actually did come to fruition, even though they seemed impossible at the beginning, because
Yep.
people took ownership of it. The fear of failure was removed, so that they knew that they were empowered to take a little bit of risk,
Yep.
and to try things that were maybe a little unorthodox and look at things from a different perspective. And then all of a sudden, you're learning and growing, and it's okay. This didn't work. Great. I'm
Right.
glad it didn't work because now I can look at it from this perspective.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And what's interesting is underpinning all that, I would argue is effort, right? So effort kind of gets underrated in today's society, and it shouldn't, in
Yeah.
my opinion. And there's been lots of posts about on LinkedIn and other places. And Jim, I saw I had a post about this recently. But you can have a great aspiration. You can learn how your mind works. You can do all these things, but effort is what propels you to get there, right? And so be proud of the effort, turn failures into successes, but the effort is really key to the momentum and the ultimate outcomes you achieve, right? So that to me
Yeah.
is sacrosanct in the middle of all this, right?
And that's perfect. And all the perspective and all that, everything in the world isn't going to help you unless you actually take the effort to take that step.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. Brilliant stuff, Bill. This has been a fantastic conversation, and look at how quickly the time has gone.
Loving it.
uh it goes so incredibly fast. And so we do want to touch on, oh god, there's so much I wanted to talk to you about. um but we're running out of time, so let's talk a little bit about what you want people to get out of your chapter. And I think we've talked
Sure.
about that a little bit. If you would kind of to sum that up in just a minute or so,
Sure.
what is the one thing that you want people to walk away with from reading your
Yep.
chapter and then ultimately reading your book, which will follow?
Great. So I'm gonna probably say it 2 or 3 times to get the message through. I'm gonna say it very slowly, but it's one phrase I have, and it's the idea or the concept, the critical core concept that you are far more powerful than you were taught to believe. And I'll say it again, you're far more powerful than you were taught to believe. And what I'm simply saying is, we're born and we're open-minded and we're very much formed by the time we're 7 and 14. Our principles, our values, our way of thinking about the world. And a lot of people think they're stuck with that, right? And I'm here to say, not only are you not stuck, but there's so much power in that lump of stuff inside of your skull that it's amazing and unlimited. You can be a songwriter, an author, you can run a company. And by the way, I don't begrudge people for whatever level they want to achieve in life. I'm just here to expose that they can achieve whatever they want to. So
Okay.
if you want to be a greeter at Walmart, fantastic, and that makes you happy. You want to be a janitor and you're happy, fantastic. That's a great way to contribute, right? So I don't judge whatever level people want to achieve. What I'm simply here to say is you can achieve whatever you desire. So if you really sit down in a quiet place and say, hey, my life is not where I want it to be, and I want to do something outstanding in terms of relationships, in terms of abundance, in terms of a role. And what I found, and I think you found, and probably everyone in Cracking the Rich Code, is purpose is the center of everything, right? And particularly as you get through your formal career, and my purpose is now linked to helping other people. And when you wake up with that kind of powerful inner purpose, traditional retirements don't matter. It's more about the impact you make in the world. And so I just want to wake people up and basically teach them that you're far more powerful than you were taught to believe. And I don't care what your grandmother, your parents, or the society has taught you. And maybe much of it's good, and you could go even further, or maybe it's a poor tape in your mind. And I'm here to say we can overlay and erase that tape and put a new one in that's going to run your life and get the kind of outcomes you want. And it starts with understanding how your mind works, understanding that it's malleable, and how is it malleable and changeable. And I'll give a powerful maybe example just to close this out here. So there's something called the placebo, and the backstory of that is there was a field doctor and a nurse in World War II, and they were giving morphine shots to people coming from battle injuries, and they were severe injuries. And what's interesting is they ran out of morphine. So the nurse said, "Oh my Lord, what are
Mhm.
we going to do? We have people with massive wounds in their chest and stomach and legs, and we can't just let them die." So she went and filled the syringes with salt water because they ran out of morphine. And amazingly, 90+% of the people on the gurneys reacted to the salt water as if it was morphine. That's the power of the mind, right? Just imagine that, right? They're going under, they're getting operated on, they're getting stitched back up, and they're coming out like they were given morphine, and they were not. And there's many studies that back the science behind all this, but that really tells you, oh my Lord, that powerful potential is unbelievable. It's unimaginable. And when I even say these words, if I think back 30 years ago, I wouldn't have believed it. I would have said, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. But now
Sure.
that I've been through all this, I learned it's actually true. And so our mind is that powerful.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. What a great way to wrap things up with some really brilliant insight. And it's true. Those voices in our head, we have to remember that a lot of those voices are not our voices. They're what other people
Yeah,
have put there, and so we
exactly.
have the opportunity to rewrite that script,
Yeah,
and that is so important. And the placebo effect is a fantastic uh, analogy to make in this because that shows truly the power of our mind. And
it does.
Bill, you are a powerful person with a powerful mind, and I'm so glad that we had this opportunity to chat. I know so many people are going to want to reach out to you. So you have a website which is in development
Yeah.
to kind of follow on with your book. The website is energyprinciple.com. That's
Yep.
INNERGY principle.com. Those I have to say that out loud for people who are only
Yep.
listening to this. Uh, you want to check that out. It is coming. It is, like I said, in development. It's a lot of under construction at this moment, but it will coincide with more by the time Cracking the Rich Code Volume 20 comes out.
Yep.
And then
That's correct.
Bill's own entire book, which kind of expands on what he started in Cracking the Rich Code, will be coming sometime, I guess, later this year, correct?
Exactly. Yeah. Summer to fall time frame.
Fantastic.
Yep.
All right. So, autograph copy for me, please. I've been looking
There you go.
forward to that.
Absolutely.
I definitely
Well, John, a
want to
pleasure to be
read that.
part of the Cracking the Rich Code with you. And I'm looking forward to working with you as we go forward as well, learning from you and hopefully helping you out in some capacity as well.
Sounds great. I love it. I look forward to some collaboration. We can do a lot together. I really think so. Folks, you can connect with Bill on LinkedIn. He's very responsive there. That's about the best place to find him. That is Bill McGough. And Bill, thank you again for taking the time to join us. Thank you for saying yes to Jim Britt, and so that you can share your experiences and then get out there. And I'm so glad that you came into this community.
My pleasure, and thank you, John, very much for what you do and for just having this podcast. It's a really great format.
Hey, I'm loving it. So
You're very good at it, I have to tell you.
Thank you. I love doing it. When Jim asked me to pick it up after Pete Beskis, who had started this thing with Jim a while back, when Pete was no longer able to continue with the podcast, and they asked me if I would jump in, I said absolutely. Give me a chance to chat with people and to learn. So, been another wonderful learning experience. Thank you again, Bill McGough. Folks, reach out to Bill on LinkedIn. Check out his chapter in Cracking the Rich Code Volume 20. Visit his upcoming website, energyprinciple.com, and check out more episodes of the Cracking the Rich Code podcast. Have a great day.